Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Ruffner, and I'm really happy that you're joining me today. What I'm going to talk about is something kind of near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to go into screen sharing. The title of my talk is Crossing Disciplines. Let's see if I can get there. It is How a Biologist Found a Home in Quantum Computing. And what I'm really going to talk about is the evolution of a career. And so I wanted to start out and talk to you all. I'm going to talk about my dreams and going to university and jobs and moving into quantum computing and talk a little bit about quantum computing and then what's happening in the future. So it, it's kind of a wide-ranging talk, and I'm going to ask for some comments in chat. Uh, but let's get started. And I want you all to kind of sit back and think about what are your dreams. When I was in high school, I had a lot of dreams. And if you look at the slide, I have kind of um, what some of my dreams were. I wanted to become a physician and do cancer research, and I wanted to travel the world and help people. I wanted to be famous, and I did want to continue to learn my entire life. So that was really what I wanted. And so now I'm not going to ask you to put this in chat, but if you're listening, I'd like you to sit down and write down your dreams. I think it's important to think about your dreams. Um, so please do that. Now, what happened is I had these dreams, and so I said, okay, I'm going to go to university and I'm going to study biology because I want to be a physician. So I was admitted to several universities, and I actually chose the least expensive. Oops, sorry. I actually chose the least expensive university because I knew that medical school was very expensive and I wanted to conserve money or not get too deeply into debt. And I majored in biological sciences and I liked it. And then one semester I took a class in neurobiology, and I'll explain neurobiology is the science of the brain. And I fell in love. I couldn't get enough of the class. I found out that there's still a lot that goes on in our brain that we know nothing about. And that fascinated me. Like, how can we not know what learning really is? How can we not know what the mechanisms are in the brain? There still is not a lot of understanding in that area. And because of that, and because I just found it so fascinating, I decided I didn't want to be a physician anymore. I wanted to be a neurobiologist. And this kind of leads me to the question that we were actually all discussing before the call is a lot of times in high school, we all dream of what we want to be. But now looking back, I see that maybe that wasn't really the right time for me to decide my career. It was probably the right time to decide my interests and to go to university and to get into diverse classes. But it was very interesting to me that I think 2 or 3 years into university, I was like, nope, I want to be a neurobiologist. So one of the things that I think that happens in life is opportunities or interesting things come up. And I believe it's always important to take advantage of that and to really explore that area of interest. So, what I did next is I went to graduate school to become a neurobiologist. And again, really like the program, really like the science. But somewhere in the middle, I decided that maybe I didn't want to be a scientist in a lab all the time. Maybe I wanted to be a business person who dealt with scientific topics. I'd always been fascinated by business and I wanted to learn more about that, but I love science. So I somehow wanted to anchor business and science together. And so what I ended up doing was leaving graduate school with a master's degree. So I didn't get my PhD. And I went to work at a scientific instrument company. So a company that provides different instruments that laboratories use to do research. So again, here's this flip that's going on where I wanted to be a physician, then a neurobiologist, and then a business person. So I'm hoping you guys are starting to see the evolution that happens in people's careers. And it's actually quite common. I always thought that I was very different because of these changes. And it turns out that when you talk to a lot of people, you find that they started in one place and they ended up in an entirely different place. So after I finished my master's, I had to get a job. And what did I want to do? And that's one of the big questions when you finish university is what do you want to do next? And thankfully, there were a lot of people around me to advise me. And what I ended up doing was going to the scientific instrument company. And my first job there was teaching. So I taught science to employees and customers. So this is what this instrument does. This is the science behind it. This is how you get your results. This is how you interpret them. So it was a very easy transition from university, where I had also been teaching as a graduate student. And after, I think, a year or so, there was a new product, and they asked me if I wanted to be a product manager for it. And I said yes. So now I'm a product manager on a product that's robotics, which I don't know anything about, but I learned. And from there, I was offered a sales job because of my scientific background. Biotechnology was becoming a big field, and they wanted someone scientific to work with these customers. And so they called on me, and it was great. Um, I worked with a lot of companies, a lot of very famous companies today, like Genentech or Gilead, that were just starting. And so it was just a great time. After a while, another company came to me. It was a new scientific tool. I was interested, so I moved companies. And then I wanted to learn something new, and I moved companies again. So I hope you're seeing that my scientific background was really important to me, and it still is to this day, that I know science and I know how to write a publication and I can tell you what DNA is or neurobiology. But I found myself changing most of the time because I wanted to learn something new. And I think for me, that's always been what my career is about. It hasn't been about money or prestige. It's really been, what am I going to learn? The next thing that happened is a friend of mine sent my resume to IBM, and IBM called me, and I didn't know this had happened. And IBM called me and said, "Hi, we'd like to interview you." And I was very puzzled. And I went and interviewed at IBM and thought, I don't know a thing about computers. I know biology. Why me? And then in the interview, they said, we have a lot of salespeople, but we don't have a lot of people who know biology. And so when a customer that we're calling on in pharmaceuticals or in biotechnology says something scientific, we don't know how to answer. So we need people that know how to do this or know how to understand what's going on. But what was interesting is they hired me to do venture capital investing. And this is something I had dabbled in a little bit um, before going to IBM, but actually became a full venture capital person at IBM, which was really a lot of fun. And I did that for a couple of years until they pulled me out because there was an area, a geography that was not doing well, and they wanted someone to lead that. And so I did that. And then got moved around in the IBM system in various jobs in sales and sales management. And a lot of times, you'll see I have a career slide. There were jobs that I was asked to do and I wasn't excited about. And I went to an executive and he said, anything that where you learn something new, do it because it's going to all add up to making your career better. So embrace these changes, even if you didn't choose them. A lot of times these are kind of the world bringing a new opportunity to you, and you really need to take it on. So I did that. And ultimately, what happened is they someone was starting an initiative in life sciences in high performance computing, so selling big computers to do genomics analysis. So, as you know, there's a lot of research doing DNA sequencing, and that creates a lot of data, and that means that you need big computers. And I became a head of a worldwide team selling these large computers to genomic research institutes. I loved it. Traveled the world. And after a couple years, I was the quantum computing team at IBM was just turning into a business. So they were going to start selling time on the computer, and they asked me to join the team. So this is really what happened to me. It was a moment of truth. It scared me. Um, Everybody in the company wanted to go work for the quantum computing team, and they were asking me, which was flattering, but quantum computing is about physics, and I don't know much about physics. And I questioned, could I learn a new science? Could I keep up with the rest of the team? And I really took a couple days to just think about whether I was up to this because it scared me. Physics scared me. And it was it was a tough decision for me. I knew all along that I had to take it, but I really had to think through my basically being scared of the job. And so my decision was to join the team. And when I sat down and looked at kind of the variables on why I made the decision, um, basically it's because I always like learning new things. And this was certainly learning a lot of new things. I had to deal with being scared. I also finally, my husband told me, look, they're not hiring you because you know physics. They're hiring you because you have a business skill that they want. So maybe you need to be less scared of the physics part and focus on what you can bring to the job, and then also focus on learning something new. So that was my approach to the job. And it worked out really well, but it took a lot of adjustment on my side um, to take on a job that was so different than what I had done most of my life. Um, I don't know if any of you have been scared to take something on. I think it requires a certain mindset, but I think it's worth taking things on and not being scared of them. And so I wanted to admit to being scared because I don't know that very many people admit that they're scared of something. So the reason why I've told you this story and this lead up to my career is because I want all of you to see that we need to follow our dreams, but also to understand that our dreams change. So I wasn't a physician and I wasn't curing cancer. I was in sales and I was using my scientific education. So dreams change and it's okay. I also want to encourage you that I think it's really helpful for you to take on new challenges and learn new skills. And a lot of times we don't think, like I didn't think I didn't sign up to join the quantum computing team. They called me. Um, it's interesting. So sometimes you don't always predict what that next role or your next step is going to be, but it's certainly worth considering when people approach you or you see a job that you're interested in. And there's always a certain desire, oh, I just want to stay in my job. It's easy. And so it's hard to try something new and take on new challenges. But I've learned that that's really important to me and to my growth. And so I push myself very hard to take new things on. And I encourage you all to consider taking new things on and trying them. It's a great way to see if you really like it and you want to continue or to pick up some skills and then move into something different. So what I did is for a talk, I made a slide that you're seeing here of all these different roles that I've had. So I've been, training specialist where I educated people on science. I was a product manager. I became a sales rep and a manager and a worldwide biotech director, a corporate venture capitalist, a sales manager, a lot of different roles before I ended up where I am today, which is an executive in quantum computing companies on the business side. I also did some stuff on the side where I led a discussion group. So I always look at this kind of and say, it's not a straight line. I thought most careers are oops, go back. I thought most careers are kind of a straight line that I start as a graduate student, then I go to this job, then I go to this job, then I keep on going, and I end up in my final job. And what happens with many people or most people is that it's not a linear career, that there are times that you simply have a job that it's not a promotion, but you're learning new skills and you're building yourself up for your next steps. And so this was always something that stunned me, that it wasn't linear. And what's interesting is when you talk to people about their career, and you might want to go home and ask your parents, you'll find that people try different things and do different things and say, yes, but I didn't like it, or yes, but this came along. And so I wanted you to see this so that you start visualizing your career as almost a learning experience, and accept that there's going to be changes and challenges. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about quantum computing. So I joined this group on quantum computing, and I thought I'd start out with you and say, does anyone here know what quantum computing is? So because this is anonymous, I'm not going to get into it. But what I did is I pulled up a definition of quantum computing, and I thought we could go through it very slowly. Um, so first of all, quantum computing is an advanced form of computing. I'll get into that a little bit more, but computing has had to diversify because problems are so complex. And quantum computing was postulated by a Nobel laureate, and probably 20 years later, someone got it to start working. And since then, we've been developing computers. Now, what's different about quantum computing is that it uses the principles of quantum mechanics to process information. What does that mean? It uses physics. So I'm not a physicist. There are people on your teachers and other people that can teach you physics deeply. That's not me. But what's interesting about quantum computing is that in quantum computing, rather than zeros and ones that are used on classical computers, quantum computing uses something called quantum bits or qubits. And what's neat about qubits is they're neither a zero or a one. They can exist in multiple states. And this is like the laws of physics. And so what this capability of each qubit existing in multiple states does is it allows computers, these quantum computers, to perform certain types of calculations potentially faster than classical computers. So, couple important things to remember. When I talk about quantum computing to someone I meet on an elevator, I say it's a new form of computing and it's based on physics. That's it. Secondly, this was something that took me and a lot of people a while to really understand. And it was at a time when IBM sold one of the top computers in the world to Oak Ridge National Labs, which is a very strong computing national labs in the United States. And this computer, and you're seeing kind of a partial picture of it, uses the energy equivalent to 10,000 homes, a lot of energy. It's the size of 2 tennis courts, so it's big. It has 185 miles of cables. You can just see some cables here, but it's 185 miles. It cost $200 million, and it was one of the most powerful supercomputers in the world. So when I read in the newspaper or on the internet about a new supercomputer and they're so big and they're so powerful, I always thought that this kind of computer could solve every problem that in the universe. So I just thought maybe if the problem is harder, they need a bigger computer. And it turns out that there's a lot of problems that these computers can't solve. And it's because of some of the inherent structure of the problems. And so there has been a need for a long time in computing for new technologies to approach some of these computers that are hard for one technology. So the classical computing, as we call this, is challenged by certain types of problems. One of these problems is called the traveling salesman. And think about it. I'm in a car and I have 50 packages. And I want to deliver those 50 packages to 50 different businesses. And I want to route it in the shortest possible way using the least amount of gas. That's a really hard problem for a computer to compute. It seems as if it's a simple problem, but it's not. There's so many variables. For that problem, traveling salesman, for example, is a problem that we believe quantum computers will be much better at solving. Now, the other point I wanted to make is that when you look at a supercomputer like this, we believe that this is equivalent to actually a small size quantum computer. So we believe that a quantum computer will be able to eclipse a classical computer in some of the problem solving. But we also believe that quantum computers will use much less energy and certainly won't be the size of 2 tennis courts. So there's a lot of positives by having this new way of computing, although it won't totally replace classical computing. So I wanted to just give you some comparisons to help you a little bit with this new concept. So quantum computing, again, we believe will be able to solve problems that are hard for classical computers and in a much shorter period of time. Now, classical computers, as I said, are never going to go away. There's always going to be, email or writing a Word document or solving certain types of problems. So quantum computing is not going to replace anything. It's going to be an additional tool that people will have for computing. What perplexes me a little bit, or what surprised me, is that quantum computers, because of the qubits and that the qubits can have many values at once, their quantum computers are programmed very differently than classical computers. So programs that you and I are familiar with or can't just simply be transferred over to a quantum computer. So part of what we see today is people are working on developing the actual quantum computers, but they're actually also developing software and how to best write software for a quantum computer. Now, quantum computers, I'm talking about what they can do and what we think they can do, and I want to underscore that they're still in development. So I think of quantum computers as a very promising research project. We know we can build them. We know that they're getting bigger and better every week. We see new announcements. But we are still a number of years away before quantum computer can solve these large problems that I referred to that you couldn't solve on a classical computer. So where quantum computers are at today is we can build them. We could ship it to your university or your high school. You would have to learn how to use it. And there's a lot of places around the world, there's governments, there's high performance computing centers that are buying these computers because it's so important to learn this technology, because there's such a strong belief that quantum computing is going to contribute so much to our futures. I added another slide. This is the fun slide, so that you can see what a quantum computer looks like. And again, what's really interesting is there's many different ways to build a quantum computer, and we call those modalities. So here I'm showing you the two most popular modalities today. One is superconducting, and that refers to the chip that is used, how the junctions on the chip are, how the connections are made. So we'll move on from that. What's interesting, when you look at the computer, you look at this left-hand picture, and I've lost my pointer, there it is, and there's this big cylinder. And what's actually inside the cylinder is something that looks like this. And in the industry, we call this the chandelier because it's pretty and it's gold, and you could maybe have it in your dining room. What in the chandelier, the actual chip for the quantum computer is right here at the bottom. So when you put it in the cylinder, what you're doing is you're insulating the chandelier from light, from noise, hopefully from vibration. And you're also adding a fluid called liquid helium, H3, that cools this chip down at the bottom. So it's like right here, and it's actually the coolest place in the universe. It's that cold, so that we can get rid of a lot of noise and we can really look at the signal of the computation. So it's a very interesting engineering project to build one of these and to have it perform reliably. Now on the right, I've put a picture of a trapped ion quantum computer, which, as you can see, is very different looking than a superconducting quantum computer. Now, this is a laboratory trapped ion quantum computer, so it's on a very stable bench, and it's actually 2 stories. And what you can't see is there's a lot of lasers and mirrors, and in the center is the trap or the chip where the actual computation takes place. So there's again, there's many different ways to build these. They use different components. Some are super cooled. Some can run at room temperature, or some will cool the chip down and the rest is at room temperature. And it's very interesting. And so what I've talked about so far is engineers to build the computer, physicists to build the computer, software engineers to write software, to write code for the computer. So there's a lot of different career paths within this industry of quantum computing that are really exciting because you're doing very novel and new things. So a couple more, just facts. There are a few hundred companies worldwide working on developing quantum computer hardware and software. And some of these companies you all know, they're IBM, they're Google, they're Amazon. Others are smaller startups. It's interesting. There's a lot of companies making progress that are small. There's a lot of progress from the bigger companies. So all bets are off. We don't know who is going to come out really on the top at the end. We believe quantum computing can be used to solve quite a few problems, speed up drug development, help in new material development, finance, where there's a lot of calculations done on risk or on fraud detection, logistics, where I talked about the traveling salesman problem, and just many other areas of research. And because this technology is so new, we have many ideas of what it can do. But part of the reason why I like being part of this industry as a biology person is because I'm always thinking about what could a biologist do with this? And actually, I've just started working with a biologist in San Diego who's using quantum computing to monitor and model vision. And so it's really exciting to see the expansion into biology of quantum computing because that's kind of what's near and dear to my heart. And what I want to say to you about quantum computing, and I think why they asked me to talk to you about it today, is because it's an industry or technology that is really growing and is going to come to its own in the future. And it's worthy of your attention because not only will it affect your life with the advancements in computing that I mentioned in the second bullet, but I feel like someone who works in quantum computing, whether it's as a business person or engineering or any number of different roles, I feel like it's almost like med school. It's a really interesting area that you can grow and learn a lot and have a job for life in this industry because so much is happening and so much growth is happening, and we need more people with skills to join the industry. So take a look at it. And so my final thoughts are, and I think I've talked a little less than I'm supposed to, but that's normal, are to never stop dreaming and to always challenge yourself. I think it's really important for you to push yourself. It's something I do every day, and I like it. Be open to new ideas and technologies. I think that many people don't consider a career in STEM. Maybe it's not something that your family has been involved in. Maybe it's not something you've ever considered, science or math, or computer coding, but it's actually a really great area to work in. My influence came, my mother is actually a physicist and still laughs at me when I tell her physics things, but we'll tell that story another time. But I was always open to the idea of becoming a scientist or becoming something very much more technical. And I've loved it. And so I encourage you to open your mind and think about a career in STEM, and certainly learn more about quantum computing because it is going to be such a force in the future. One of the things that I do at night and I do in my free time, not all of my free time, is I will look at things that I want to learn more about. And it's kind of out of order on this slide, but there's a lot of videos up on YouTube or even on TikTok. There's a science channel or STEM channel. But there's a great video that's quantum computing explained in 60 seconds or a beginner's guide to quantum computing. And I really encourage you, if you've taken the time to sit through this talk and listen to me talk about my career and how I'm now in quantum computing and love it, watch a couple videos and learn just a little bit about quantum computing for yourself. And then secondly, if you're more interested in quantum computing, there are a ton of resources that are available to you for free. So there are summer schools. I've listed a couple: Qubit by Qubit, QC Map, or actually that's a typo. It's QCamp, sorry. And then the coding school, but you can look it up. You can attend these summer schools virtually. People just love them and rave about them. They're very creative. They're very engaging. And I just encourage you to look into this technology and learn a little bit about it. And as soon as you're aware of it from my talk and maybe from watching a video, you're going to start seeing in the news where people are talking about quantum computing. And there's quite a bit of quantum computing in Canada, some very impressive programs. And it's just a good thing to know about and to try to continue to add to your knowledge on. So with that, I am going to stop screen sharing and say thank you for listening to this. And again, show you that your journey in life and career can change, but it all adds up together. And I think that's what I was trying to say with my title, that even though I'm a biologist and now in quantum computing, there's times where my biology kicks in and is very helpful. And I enjoy the fact that I have that additional point of view to contribute in conversations with different people. So I encourage you all to learn a little bit about quantum computing, to contribute in conversations with different people, and also to consider a career in STEM, which I believe is just one of the most fascinating careers that one could have. And if I had to do it all over again, who knows what I would have done, but maybe more in coding, or maybe in physics. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. And now we're going to turn off the recording and I'm going to answer questions. I'll also mention that if you look at my name, there's a application called LinkedIn. And if you ever want to reach out to me and ask me questions, just go to LinkedIn, look up my name, and there's a button you can click on message and send me a message, and I will answer you. So feel free to ask me any question or ask for resources, and I will be there to help you. Thank you very much.